Hello everyone, thank you for being here. We're going to get started if everybody's settled and ready to go. Welcome, I am Lindsay. I'm the Community and Economic Development Coordinator for the town of Kentville, but tonight I am your host and moderator for the comment section of the evening. We have a few folks here with us on staff tonight that I'll introduce. First, our Director of Planning and Development is Darren Shoup. He's right here. Next to him is our Development Officer, Ben Kroll. And down at the end is GIS Technician and Development Officer, Kirsten Duncan. Sorry, she's had a lot of different titles over the times that we worked together. So the order of the evening will be pretty simple. We're going to start with a presentation from the Director of Planning and Development, and after that we will have open time for public comments or questions for Darren. We only have one person registered to speak, but that doesn't mean that when that person's done, you can't put your hand up and ask for your time. Each person will be given one 5-minute time slot. If you haven't already, please sign in at the table over there by the door. The meeting is intended to collect feedback from and answer questions for residents of the town of Kentville. The meeting is being recorded for the public record. It's not being live streamed, but it is being recorded and it will be posted publicly at a later time, so please be aware of that. Registered speakers will be called on first. Like I said, we only have one so far. And then others will be given time at the end if there is time remaining. We will end the meeting at 8 o'clock. So if there's someone who we somehow run out of time and it's after 8 o'clock, you're welcome to still send your feedback for consideration. It will be added to the public package that council considers. There are some cards over on the table there with Darren's email address on it, and you can send your feedback or your questions directly to Darren. Until May 31st, is that the date? Okay, great, thank you. Each speaker will be asked to come forward, state your name and place of residence, and then you'll be provided with 5 minutes to speak or ask questions to the director. Once your time is up, an alarm will actually go off and we'll ask you to return to your seat. I do remind you of a few rules. It is not a debate, so we are here to collect your feedback and hear your ideas and opinions. We don't want you to debate somebody else's comment that may have been already made or try to disparage others who may have spoken before you. Just tell us what you think and what you want us to hear, and that's really all we require. You'll see that some council members are in attendance tonight. Council is here in observation mode. It is not a council meeting, so they will not be answering questions. So please just keep that in mind. This is really important work that we're doing here as a community. This is the process by which the council gets to hear from the people, and that's a fundamentally important part of municipal government in our democratic system. We want it to be effective, and in order for it to be effective, it needs to remain respectful. So we just expect that from you all, and I know that it will be fine. If it becomes disrespectful or devolves into something, then we'll just end the meeting. But those are the rules of engagement, and with that, I will hand it over to Darren to get us started.
Good evening, everyone. Let's see my slide notes. So I I'm going to try to keep it short as I can, but still be complete in my presentation. So probably just a little bit, probably about 15 minutes worth of slides, and then we'll get into whatever feedback or comments or questions you may have tonight. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to present proposed amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, to explain the planning rationale behind the proposed amendments and how the framework has evolved. So this is the second attempt to look at some of these issues, and we've amended some things along the way. Also to review feedback and discussion that has arisen through staff, PAC, and council conversations, basically since the start of this year. To receive, of course, the main purpose is to receive public feedback prior to further consideration, and as we take this application through the different steps that will come. And again, as Lindsay mentioned, no decisions will be made tonight. This is purely a staff engagement with the public, so there's no decisions at all at this point. So I'm going to start with some basics for this. So I'm going to step you through this a little bit. The nature of land use planning. So municipal land use planning regulates the use of land and buildings. It focuses on building forms, density, scale, site design, access, parking, landscaping, buffering, and compatibility. Those are the main sort of things that we look at. Municipal planning does not regulate personal identity, income, health status, or personal support needs. So we have to know where we stay in our lane with this because we're required to by the provincial government under the Municipal Government Act. The focus of land use planning is the physical use and impact of development within the community. So a little bit about Kentville's planning framework. The municipal planning strategy establishes council's long-term policy directions. So that's where we set out some of the big ideas that they want to achieve over a certain time period. And we're in the process of updating these now. We have a plan review that's ongoing, so we're starting to look at all of the policies again. But the land use bylaw itself implements those policies through different zoning and development standards, and subdivision bylaw regulates the division of land and infrastructure standards. And the proposed amendments we have tonight involve potential changes to both the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw. So in terms of municipal context and growth structure, the proposed amendments are being considered within our current existing growth structure. The medium density residential zone, R3, and the institutional zoning, there already exist throughout the community. We'll look at some maps here in a second to demonstrate where that actually takes place. So the first map, this is a generalized future land use map. It describes, basically you see the 5 categories on the bottom left of commercial, open space, residential, institutional, and industrial lands. So these are where council back in 2018 envisioned these types of uses occurring. So these are the primaries within the commercial and within the residential zones in particular, designations in particular. There are different zones underneath each of those designations which describe different types of uses within that. For residential use, it's mostly density that's being controlled. With commercial use, it's different types of uses that are placed in different parts of town based on what they're hoping for.
Can you give us just where things are here? Just more labels like lots of streets or streets?
We'll get to the question part
No, I
after.
say on this map, you put a map up here, I don't understand.
Well, I can orient it basically. It's not obvious. It's north is top of the map. So the hospital, which is a major landmark, not in town, but can we do anything with the cursor? Okay. Let's start downtown. So the pale blue cluster in the center, that's our downtown area basically. That's zone C1 commercial general. Building out from that, if we go west, we start to get into some of the park areas, the ballparks and things like that as we move down Park Street, Main Street into Park Street. And then as we go along, there's residential there. And then we finally get down to where some of the car dealers are. And that's sort of very west part of town. And if we went east from our downtown core, we're working out towards Miners Landing and the border with B- basically. Does that help? Okay, great. So what we're also looking at here, I mentioned under the designations, those sort of 5 big designations. These are how the zoning breaks down within the community as well. So you see a much larger range of colors there, which represent mostly, again, for commercial and residential. We differentiate some of those uses based on density. And again, for commercial, there's different types of commercial uses that are permitted in different parts of town. So it's much more of a patchwork of uses on the land use on the zoning map. So we'll flip back and forth between these maps too as we look at this. There may be some questions too that are located in different areas that we might want to point to. So from the provincial point of view, and we take our cue from what the province allows us to do under the Municipal Government Act again. So the MGA and statements of provincial interest establish the broader planning framework that we work within. Kentville's municipal planning strategy already supports housing diversity, compact development, mixed-use compatibility, and residential intensification. And it does that in different ways based on the zone that you'd be looking at. And the proposed amendments build upon these same types of principles. So the existing residential institutional framework, Kentville's planning framework already contains a range of residential institutional land use categories. We looked at some of them, on the previous map. The types of uses would include group homes, homes for special care, boarding houses, assisted living facilities, and institutional uses. And they're all similar in some ways under some of the discussion that we have and some of the ways that we've looked at these particular uses. There's some overlap between them. And the next point speaks to that, is as housing forms have evolved, there's been overlap between residential and institutional uses. There always kind of has been, but I think there's different types of instances where those things are being combined now, and that's the program-based housing idea that we look at. So why do we need to clarify some of these terms? The current framework under the 2018 planning documents, there's some uncertainty regarding approval pathways and land use interpretation based on the definitions that we have right now. The amendments that we're presenting are intended to focus more directly on land use function, compatibility, and build form. And the proposed changes seek to improve administrative clarity, so it makes it easier to actually look at an application when it comes in. That's more clarity for not only the applicant, but the residents around in the area where it may be, as well as staff and council. So under the existing zoning context, the R3 zone already accommodates a broad range of residential forms and densities. Institutional zoning already accommodates a range of community serving and public uses. And again, the proposed amendments, they also work within the same structure. So the next map that we're going to show gives a demonstration of where the R3 medium density and institutional zones currently exist in town. So the yellowy orange mustard color, I guess, would be the institutional zones that currently exist. And the large one on the southeast side of town is the agricultural research facility. So that's the one that really stands out and takes up most of our institutionally zoned property. And the remaining the red spots are the R3 zones. So there's not, in the full picture of the town, there's very limited of each currently. So, under the previous amendment framework, when we were looking at doing creating some amendments, basically in the fall leading up to December of last year, they explored more operational classifications for supportive housing, transitional housing, and emergency shelters. And the previous approaches also explored occupancy thresholds, separation distances between uses, and additional approval triggers. The framework was refined to focus more directly on the things that we actually have control over, that being land use function, compatibility, and build form. And I can explain a little bit the operational classifications too. I'll just do that right now, actually. We don't have a slide for that one. But just to give an example of what I mean by operational distinctions, we had language in there that talked about how a particular facility would be managed, how the services would be delivered, how residents are supported, or sort of the internal program functions within that particular building. And again, that steps outside of what we can really speak to, and as per the Municipal Government Act, where we're constrained to some degree to look at, say, land use function, compatibility, and build form. So we received some previous feedback at a previous PPM, public participation meeting, and from council, and now from also the planning advisory committee. And questions were raised regarding the distinction between residential and institutional uses. There are also concerns raised regarding operational definitions and enforceabilities. I spoke a little bit about the operational side of things that sort of outside of our purview. And there was discussion which focused on compatibility, public review processes, and the role of existing definitions. A lot of what we're looking at is the sort of power of definitions to determine what we can actually do. So what we're proposing tonight is that program housing be recognized primarily as a residential use, The framework focuses on residential function, build form, site design, and compatibility, returning back to the things that we can actually speak to. Program-based housing is proposed within the R3 zone because of the compatibility of scale and build form is already kind of contemplated in that zone. So the density level is similar for that type of housing. Emergency shelters are proposed as a distinct institutional use, which differs from the version that we had in the fall, due to the operational intensity and community service characteristics of that particular use. And we would look to use the existing planning tools that we have in our municipal planning strategy for site plan approval and development agreements to shape those types of developments. So just some specifics now. So we're proposing a set of 4 new residential policies here, and I will quickly read through them. So the first is, it shall be the intention of council to recognize program-based housing as a residential use, providing accommodation with a shared or group living arrangement, which may include the provision of supports or services. So there's a marriage there of residential with some institutional, in the sense that services are being provided at those establishments. The second, RS 29, it shall be the intention of council to enable program-based housing within the medium-density residential R3 zone, subject to the requirements of the land use bylaw. Program-based housing shall be subject to site plan approval in accordance with the same threshold and provisions applicable to other multi-unit residential development in order to ensure compatibility of form, scale, and the site design with surrounding development. So compatibility. For RS 30, it shall be the intention of council to require the land use bylaw establishes provisions regulating the form, scale, and site design of program-based housing to ensure compatibility with adjacent residential uses. And lastly, for this one, it shall be the intention of council to require a development agreement for program-based housing developments exceeding 8 dwelling units or sleeping units. Quickly looking at the institutional policies, there are 2. So it shall be the intention of council to recognize that institutional uses vary in scale and intensity, and that certain uses may be limited to specific zones or subject to additional approval requirements in accordance with the land use bylaw. And also, it shall be the intention of council to permit emergency shelter uses within the institutional zone by development agreement. And we also tack onto that, there's a couple other that have to appear elsewhere in the municipal planning strategy to make the whole thing work. So section 4.2.4 on development agreements, and these 2 items kind of reflect each other. They shall be amended to include emergency shelters within the institutional zone, and also program-based housing exceeding 8 units within the R3 requiring a development agreement. And policy GD5 just reflects that, basically, that those are the ways that we would administer those types of developments where this proposal is going forward. Okay, so in terms of the key policy direction, we're getting to the summary part of this, so we're not too much longer. The proposed policy framework focuses on residential versus institutional land use function, and looks at the compatibility of build form and scale, so kind of the scale of what is being developed. It directs the appropriate approval pathways, and it allows for public review for opportunities for larger or more intensive developments that may be contemplated. And to step through the process very quickly, the program-based housing in the R3 zone would generally proceed through a site plan approval, and larger program-based housing proposals would require development agreement approval. Emergency shelters within the institutional zone would also require development agreement approval, and development agreements generally include public notification, public hearings, council review, and appeal rights. So there's a little more oversight for that level of application. So for the development agreement, just to quickly look at the process, it provides a site-specific review process, so there's certain criteria that have to be met when looking at a development agreement, when both staff and council look at a development agreement. The process includes public notification, public hearing, council consideration, appeal rights, we spoke to that already. And council, as part of the criteria, may consider such things as compatibility, traffic, parking, landscaping, buffering, servicing, and the surrounding development context. For site plan approval, slightly different process. It focuses more on the site layout and the functional design of the application, and can include, as part of its criteria, landscaping, access, circulation, lighting, buffering, parking, and compatibility measures. And this is overseen by our development officer sitting on my right. And it also includes the process of notification and appeal for all properties within a 30-meter radius of the proposed development. Almost there, 2 more slides. So just to talk about how the process has evolved, again, we've looked at 2 different ways of tackling these questions over the last 8 months. The revised process framework reflects more public feedback. PADs, it reflects the discussions that we've had through public feedback, I should say. Planning Advisory Committee discussion, intensive staff review, I would say, and various implementation considerations. The framework has shifted away from operational distinctions and towards more of a land use function and build form. Again, we're getting back to staying in our lane. And the revised approach more closely aligns with the Kentville's, the existing policy framework, the planning framework. So in summary, the intent of the proposed amendments is to improve overall the clarity, consistency, administration for these types of developments. The revised framework focused more directly on land use function, compatibility, and build form. And the amendments build upon existing planning principles while maintaining public review opportunities as we look at these different applications. So at this time, I'm ready to cede the mic over to the crowd. I'll leave this last slide, which just a little direction on our when we receive written comments, and you can either send it to the planning@kentville.ca or my own DSHUPE, and there's cards up front for that for my contacts as well. So yeah, back to Lindsay. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have one registered speaker, and I'll call them up now. That's Missy Vino. Like to come on up and. Oh.
Hi, my name is Missy Vino, and I live in Kentville, up on Hillcrest Avenue. So I think what I'm gonna be doing is just kind of giving, I think, a summary of what you said, and then you could, correct me if I'm wrong. So my understanding, the purpose of the rezoning, if I'm understanding it correctly, is essentially provides access to program-based housing organizations to purchase existing R1 properties that are for sale or rezone R1 to R2 or R3, depending on the size of the unit being built. Placement of homeless individuals would be determined by the organization. Location of these units and homes will not be disclosed to the Kentville residents, and any issues that may result in harm are to be handled by the police. And I'm not suggesting that this would be the case in every situation. I think I'm a little short. everyone hear me now?
Yes.
All right, so I'll take this from the top. If I'm understanding, everything correctly, the purpose of the rezoning, essentially provides access to program-based housing organizations to purchase existing R1 properties that are for sale, or rezone R1 to R2, rezone R1 to R2 or R3, depending on the size of the unit being built. Placement of homeless individuals would be determined by the organizations. Location of these units and homes will not be disclosed to Kentville residents, and any issues that may result in harm are to be handled by the police. And I'm not suggesting that this will be the outcome in every situation, but, yeah, that would be my understanding, is that you guys are just providing the infrastructure, for this, like so that, these organizations are able to, have access to land, that they wouldn't previously have had access to. Is that in a nutshell?
Turn this back on or not?
Megan, well, let's just use the same mic, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, that one seems to be loud. That one's better, yeah, just.
As long as the speaker is like 2 to 3 inches away.
You're on. All right. Use the stand for this. Nicole, so let me see if I can get your question correct, first of all. So you're asking about, like, particularly for lower density residential, R1 or 2, potentially being rezoned R3, which would then accommodate program-based housing in this, under that rezoning. First of all, a rezoning process such as that is a council process. So there's some council control over that. Through that, there's also the public feedback that there would be through any rezoning application. So there'd be public opportunities to speak your mind against that if that's not something you favor. For program-based, again, we also come into different levels of control. So you'd have to first rezone the property, the hypothetical property, and then it would be through, depending on the scale of the development being proposed, up to 8 would be through site plan approval. So then another process on top of that, that would be through development officer, primarily through a set of specific criteria. If the proposed developer wanted to go any higher in terms of number of units, then that'd be through a development agreement, which again is a council process. So there's potentially 2 checks through council for a larger scale program-based housing, not just in our, going from R1 to R3, R1 or R2 to R3, but pretty much anywhere in R3. Through this new process, there'd be two council checks on that. So there'd be 2 separate opportunities for public neighbors to oppose or support potentially a given application for that. Is that?
Is, policy RS31, is that the same thing?
My policies are good with me. So policy RS31 is the intention of council to require development agreement for program-based housing developments exceeding 8. So that would be the larger scale development, yes. So that'd be the second check from council on that type of development to make sure it's appropriate for that particular neighborhood. That gets you.
I guess that answers really the only question, I guess, that you can answer, because the organizations that are going to be applying for grants to either purchase existing residential homes,
Right.
which they can purchase R1, like residential homes for that purpose, is that correct?
I'm not aware of how the granting opportunities work for
Like if a
multi-family
home was
properties.
for sale.
Right.
They could then use that, house.
Yeah.
They could divide it up, or they can leave it as it is, but they could use it, for programs.
It would depend on, I'm not as an expert on how the province awards grants or the criteria that they use.
Right.
I'm aware of some properties that have been purchased for basically program-based housing and opportunities in
Yeah, like
town.
downtown Kentville, like, yes, I'm familiar.
And I'm not sure if the province sets their sites to keep those types of developments where the services are mostly located.
Right.
Or if they would look further afield in town to different parts, primarily residential areas. I really don't know that. I can't answer that effectively.
Right, so essentially, once the rezoning is approved, and you guys go ahead with it, unless you need to rezone a particular section, then it's pretty much hands-off. Like, and then it's up to these organizations to then decide what programs, where the programs are gonna go, within the town. Because once that rezoning happens, then it does open up quite a bit of possibility, like there's not really a lot of limitations on where they can go, once the zoning is approved.
If we picked any of the currently R3 zone properties in town, the application for, if it was program-based housing, would have to be considered through that development agreement. We go back to RS 31.
Okay.
So that would be that check at that point. Once it's already zoned R3, the potential for development could occur, but it would have to be through council's purview to look at all the factors involved with the development agreement, and they don't have to. They have options when it comes to looking at a development agreement if they don't feel it's appropriate as well. So
Okay, so.
that's where there'd be some back and forth between the community and council on making sure that was appropriate.
Okay, so just so I understand correctly what you're saying, so the program-based housing, any new development would have to go through you guys first.
Yes, trying to think if that would apply to renovations or not, but if it's in an R3 zone
Yeah.
and there's a new, could it be an existing R3 that looked at some sort of repurposing of that structure? But I think to get the program-based housing use permitted, it would have to go through then either the site plan approval or development agreement, depending again on the scale of the number of units attached to it. So I think that's always gonna be the case, because I think on the fly.
Is there anything, I mean, maybe this is not even something we can answer, but, like, with homelessness, and like, people need places to live, people need, supports, like whatever they need, I'm all for, making that available to people. Sometimes you can get, individuals that, they could be known for being particularly violent.
Missy, we're gonna have to just stop you right there, just for now. You've gone over your comments.
Oh, okay,
And I'll
sure.
open it up to some other folks, and I'll show
Yeah,
you.
yeah, no, that's fine.
We can always
We're gonna
talk
talk about
separate.
land use, right? I can't talk about what people do and don't do,
Yeah.
right?
Again, for us, we have to stay in our lane. I can only answer
Yeah,
questions
no,
of certain,
that's totally fine.
because that's what my job is based on.
Yeah.
But I'm always,
And
I'm
that's, I
also,
guess that's what I'm just trying to clarify, is
yeah,
it's
What can we do?
land use, you guys don't really, that's all you guys are doing, and you are able to do, yeah.
we have our lane that we
Yeah,
can focus
no,
on.
that's good, that's good,
Yeah, and I'm open to chat with anyone after this as well,
yeah.
in the future.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to have to do that, but we have to make sure there's time for everybody. If there's anyone else, I see one hand. Is that Lloyd? Can you just come up to the front, Lloyd? We just really want to discontinue audience back and forth, just because, we gotta keep some sort of process.
Not a big question, but does the council and the planning department have a sense of what properties in Kentville right now would potentially be R3?
Share my. maybe look, if you want to stay close, just in case.
I can yell.
Okay, okay. We don't, yeah. We'll figure it. What could potentially be zoned R3? We know what has been zoned, but we have what we've received in terms of applications, and that's pretty much all that we know of. We don't have any,
Is there any R3 in development now that we don't know about?
no, if there were an application to rezone R3, it would be publicly made available once the application comes in.
So it's sort of the brick colored areas
Yes,
that are.
yes. That's all.
But you could potentially, if I'm understanding this, you could take an R1 and jump it to an R3.
We have very specific and stringent rules with R1 in our documents where you actually can't upzone it like that. We've held on fast to that idea that R1 stays R1.
Okay.
Are there occasions where that can be changed? As I look to my DOs? They'll determine that, but in almost all cases, that it's capped at R1. That's often due to the size of the lot too, as much as anything.
So the property that I'm particularly interested in, which is, that's now R2.
Correct.
And the application is to go to R3.
Mhm. That is one that's available on our website. Thank you. Okay, so the only occasion where you can go from R1 to R2 is where the subject property is currently vacant and has frontage on the collector road, which is, there's specific set of roads for collectors. We don't have that map up here, but they're fairly limited.
Just one more follow-up.
Sure.
Test cases.
Yeah.
Is there a directive from the province, or do you people, on council and planning, have a goal in mind of how much R3 you want in town?
Again, I can't speak for the province, but and I really shouldn't speak for council either, because they're sitting right in front of me, and I'll be in trouble. But in terms of a quota for R3, we don't really have anything like that. It's based on what applications come in. So if we see an application looking to change zones in that way, that we look at, there's no queue for it, there's no quota for it. It is what it is in terms of applications. Okay.
We have one in the back, actually.
Sorry, I want to ask you to come up.
Sorry, the reason that we want you to come up is not just because of decorum, but also we're recording for the public record so that it can be posted later. And we just want to make sure that people are tuning in later at home can hear what the audience is asking. Otherwise, it's just, Darren answering questions. Thank you.
I'll just go up to the mic.
Yeah, I think so. We'll just leave it there.
Hi, it's Tom Herman from Elm Avenue. First, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. It's been useful. And the question I have, perhaps not germane directly, but I'm curious because I know relatively little about the planning process in Kentville. I will acknowledge my ignorance. But I'm struck by the categories R1, R2, R3. First, I'm curious, how flexible historically have those categories been? In other words, how wedded is the town to those specific categories and the criteria within them? And is there some kind of provincial constraint on that limits the imagination and the creativity of the town to accommodate what are clearly important needs in the community? So that's my first question. I'll
Field that first. And then
absolutely, if you like.
We'll deal with back and
Thanks.
forth.
Great.
Just turn the mic around.
Just be quiet. No, that's good. No. Historical context for residential zones is the first one. So they have changed. Kirsten behind me here would probably be better to answer that because she's been around the town longer than I have. But my understanding is that they've changed a bit from,
2000,
2001, early 2000s. In 2018, we brought in this set for the new plan, for the plan review that we're currently engaged in. There may be different mindset towards where we want to go with that. And I've heard some different thoughts from council about what we want to do with residential zones and what we want to do with all kinds of zones. Early conversations, so it's not really, nothing crystallized at this point. What was the second part?
Well, actually, I'm curious about how solid those, how thick, whether there are provincial constraints on what you can do, to modify those classes.
Right.
Increase the number of classes, whatever.
One of the provincial statements of interest on housing. We have some, basic standards that we have to hit when we do the plan review. So it makes sense to talk about the things that the community is concerned about, and there is flexibility in that. So looking at density, there's different ways of doing that. That's one of the main concerns, whether it's a single family or single detached dwelling neighborhood. There may be room for some density within that. Some areas of town may be more appropriate for larger scale density. That's one of the main ones, because it looks at traffic, it looks at buffering, but so that your neighbors aren't looking right over top of you necessarily. Different things like that we can consider. And there's also mixed use as well, some mixed use areas where you can have a commercial ground floor and residential above. So particularly in areas of town like where Donald Hills is in the process of being developed, there's a whole new mindset towards how residential and commercial development could happen up in that part of town that hasn't even been thought about yet because of the nature of the growth of the town. So there's quite a bit of latitude in how we could consider that. So.
Thanks, can I now do
Oh, I can't stop doing that.
yeah, okay.
I can turn around.
Yeah,
if you want.
that's
I
good.
just don't want to put back to
Yeah,
down.
I'll stay.
But that's better, because I don't want to put my back to everyone else. Well, one of the things that strikes me is that if you look at the criteria in R3 at present, and I don't say this in a pejorative way, but it's a bit of a dog's breakfast in terms of the uses. And I'm wondering whether adding yet more diversity to that range of uses under one classification makes the classification actually useful in the planning process, rather than some rethinking around the classifications and the categories. And I realize that's probably, people sit behind me are probably rolling their eyes saying, oh my God, that's an administrative nightmare. Don't suggest it, but it's just a question. And if I could, if you indulge me, I'd just add one more comment, because you centered the conversation, and I think rightly so, on land use. And you're avoiding other topics which are the purview of other agencies and departments, and I totally get that. But it's just a comment. But in that consideration of land use, I, having lived in Kentville for 30+5 years, I think there has been a distinct lack of what I would call integrated planning, because there are whole ranges of things which never come up in the conversation. They're not in the amendments and so on, but there are things that are important as they touch on land use. And one of them is dealing with the actual capacity, physical capacity of the landscape and how it works and understanding that. So how these changes affect things like climate change remediation planning. What's happening with climate change remediation planning? I understand there's an exciting new urban forest plan possibly that the town has just received funding for or sub-funding for, and that's really exciting. But before we see dramatic changes in the planning structure, I would hope that we can start to explore those other elements, which are key components about how you fit people into a landscape so that they live happy, healthy lives, and that though their neighbors do as well, and that they can continue to do so for generations. Just a comment, and I will shut up. Thanks very much for indulging me.
Let's switch spots for a minute. I address you?
It's a bit of a dance. So first of all, in terms
Like
of.
I'm making a thesis.
Pardon my back, everyone. For R3, it being appropriate in R3, part of what I was trying to convey is that if it stays at the same scale as other R3 developments, where we see it as housing primarily, yes, there's an institutional component, and when we're still looking at what's the appropriate threshold, does it become more institutional than residential at a certain point? And then should we look at a mechanism for considering that? But as it stands, and the way we presented it so far, and can always be adjustments to this as well, of course, but we're seeing it as an equivalent housing form as any other housing form in town. So that's why we kept it at R3. We thought that would be a good place to start with it. So that's kind of logic behind that. In terms of some of the environmental things you just mentioned, we are looking at that more intensively, I think, than we have in the past. Certainly the stormwater issue has been one on the top of the town's mind for certainly since the last big rainfall, but longer than that. And we're looking at ways of bringing more environmental policies into the documents as well as we go forward. And the urban forest study is part of it. There's coastal flooding, because we still get some coastal flooding effects here, as well as other types of flooding. So the river flooding as well. So we are definitely looking at those.
If I could just finally, thank you very much. I think, I guess it's on
Record. Thanks very much, Darren. I appreciate that. And I think the point that you just made is really important, because it may turn out that the environmental criteria should become a more significant determinant of the use than the actual type of housing. In other words, I can see, for instance, the density of housing is probably much more important in terms of the long-term sustainability in a neighborhood than the type of housing. So I hear your point loud and clear about the similarities between the grouping of different types of housing together based on the fact that they're all housing, but I think the scale is probably a more important question necessarily than the nature, but it's just my own personal bias, and thank you very much.
Councilor Savage? Resident Savage?
Sorry. So my question is around industrial. How much industrial is there that's buildable, and do we have the option to designate more land institutional? Institutional is what I meant to say from the onset. Yeah. How much, land institutional that's buildable, and could we designate more land institutional? Sorry for that.
Okay, it's doing it for me too.
Yeah.
And so we have the map back up, and the sort of mustard yellow indicates where we currently have. Just move this a little bit. See if that helps. Where we currently have institutional, are the language in our documents right now treat institutional in a somewhat strange way, where there are no. Can we go back to the G form for a second, please? The general feature land use. Okay. So that's exactly the same, basically. There's no future in institutional. These are all occupied, basically, what we have now. So there's never a mind to set aside areas for institutional, new institutional development. In terms of redesignating, that is always a possibility. We haven't, I don't know if we've seen any redesignation to institutional since the last, no, so there hasn't been much of that. So we'd be introducing it with this type of proposal we're talking about tonight for emergency shelters.
So all of the institutional at this juncture is used?
It's, oh, yes, I believe it all has a use attached to it at this point. It's not vacant land, to my knowledge, at least. But there's a process to redesignate.
Yeah.
If that were, but again, for a redesignation to get to, an emergency shelter would be redesignation, rezone plus development agreement under the current,
Yeah.
proposed plan.
Anybody else? Oh, over here. Thank you. Come back.
Hello, my name is Michelle. Thanks for letting me speak. I actually do not live in the town of Kentville. I live just outside of the town of Kentville, in North Kentville, and I think my perspective does have some relevance here. I live next door to Nexus, directly next door to Nexus. And if everyone doesn't know what Nexus is a institution owned by the province that houses young adults who have a variety of challenges to their life. So potentially you would think that they would be a horrible neighbor to live next door to. And I cannot say that that's the case. I haven't lived there very long. I lived there approximately a year, and I have yet to have one challenge with any of the young adults that live there. So just kind of putting that into perspective when we think about supportive housing. I do really appreciate that the town and the staff have listened to community and have made the distinction between a shelter and supportive living. To me, they are very different things. I have worked in both housing supports and in emergency shelters, and I do strongly believe that a shelter should not be in a residential area, that it should be in an institutional zone setting, and that supportive housing is housing, and it is a very different situation. And I just wanted to point out that on this page here, number 5, I really appreciate you listing out the different types of program-based housing, and because it was a good reminder for me that not all program-based housing is for folks who are unhoused. So thank you very much.
Resident Zadian.
I think no secret I live in Kentville. I want to thank you for that presentation, and I want to kind of chime in what Michelle just said, that program-based housing is not just for people that have, illness or addictions or whatever. We have to remember that that could be one of us someday, it could be one of our parents or someone with disabilities, right? That's an important point. But my question for you, Director Shu, and I'll look at you, is in R3, the town of Kentville, as of right, is already allowing program-based housing, correct? As of right, you can have up to.
Residential care facility, right? That's residential care facilities.
Correct, but that would mean right now that somebody could buy an R3 property or own one and have up to 6 units in, correct?
Yes.
So the only change in this is that someone could now buy one and have up to 8 before it comes to council. So it's not a huge change than what's already in place, am I understanding?
I would have to follow up a little bit with that.
Okay.
If you allow me.
Yeah, okay.
Just
My understanding, I'm not a planner, so that's what I interpreted, but maybe,
Okay. no.
yeah.
Just to add a little bit of context to what you said, under our current definitions,
Thank you. I don't need this.
so we have 3 terms under the same definition, which is also awkward, but we're working through these things. So it's a residential care facility, a home for special care, or a group home. They all mean the same thing. They mean a community-based group living arrangement in a single unit where accommodations are provided and which may include additional services for residents with physical and or intellectual disabilities or are marginally disadvantaged. And we don't have a definition for what marginally disadvantaged means, so it's very much up to interpretation, including but not limited to medical care, supervisory or personal care, and counseling, but does not include hospital or facility licensed or under contract by Corrections Canada or Nova Scotia Corrections. So the caveat there, I guess the issue that we have in interpretation is what is a marginally disadvantaged person. So, but what you're saying is correct, that we do have a path forward for those types of developments currently in R3 up to certain level.
Anybody else with a question? question or comment, please come on up.
It's very
It's a long
intimidating
walk.
up here. Kelly Grant, Elm Avenue. I guess I just wanted to actually reflect first on this map, because I found this a bit shocking, actually. I just see so much residential, potential there. I'm kind of shocked that this is the direction that Kentville feels that it needs to go. And I'm also quite concerned about the lack of green in that picture. I know we have existing parkland. I would like to see about double or triple that parkland in Kentville. Especially in the commercial area, I find it lacking a lot of green. I'm pleased, and this is the first I've heard about an urban forest strategy or town forest strategy. This is that would be huge for us, because I feel like there's so many effects from the heat, that more trees, more park space, which makes Kentville so much more enjoyable and livable. So when we're talking about land use, and this has probably nothing to do with program-based housing, but I just wanted to mention that as of a concern to me, and I'm thinking others in Kentville. But I guess also, because I'm trying to come up to speed on all this too, and I'm not really very knowledgeable on how many of these different types of program-based housing are in existence in Kentville right now. I didn't even know about Nexus, so I'm sorry, but it sounds awesome. I guess I'm wondering, what scale are we right now, and just to put it in context. So that's probably one of my first questions, but so why don't you?
You want me to try?
Yeah. So probably.
Okay, context.
Yeah.
The first thing you mentioned was seeing the amount of residential designated areas up there and being surprised by that. What did you mean by that?
Well, is this what it is now?
That's currently what it's
This
designated.
is future land use map, so I
Yes.
thought, so what's the now land use map? Is it pretty much the same?
And now, probably, it's closer to what we have for the land use, the zoning map. That reflects what's currently there.
Okay,
So you see something like the,
so this is just so confusing, so a
Yeah.
lot of that orange and the future uses now that's R5, which I don't even know what
it,
that
it
is.
includes both currently developed and land set aside for future development.
Okay,
So, and this ties into the question you had about park space as well. For some of those larger lots, and there's quite a few of them around the Donald Phillips Road, the particular part that hasn't been completed yet. When those are eventually, if and when they're developed, there'll be parkland dedication as a part of that subdivision process.
Yeah.
So you see more parkland, as required as part of that. I know the Parks and Rec Department is also looking at their own strategy. So that may well address some of the issues that you have in terms of, how much we have and where we have it. Like if there's a need, a future need for it, if there's current need for it, where should it be, how much should it be, what kind should it be? So, that would be part of their more their realm, but did you have a?
so does Kentville have an environmental or climate change action committee for residents or for staff? I just don't know.
No, we don't have a committee for that particular purpose. We have just hired a new staff member, as a climate action coordinator, who's updating a lot of the work that we've done in the past. And actually, she's currently doing public engagement on some of those issues right now. So, it'll be on our website presence, and it'll be on our social media presence, where she's getting out with different staff members to talk about that. So, that's a current project.
And then the context part?
Can you explain that to me again?
How many program-based housing should we have in Kentville right now? There's so many categories.
There are many categories.
And I don't even know if we have any or all of these in existence, I have no idea.
I'm not gonna name them, but I know there's at least 4 there. There's youth-based, there's women's family shelter,
Yeah.
there's, homelessness, and I'm not, if there's any others, there's probably other types that I can't think of off the top of my head right now, but I can think of,
Hypothetical.
there's 3 or 4 at least, different types. And there are some that like again, for corrections, they don't typically let us know where their facilities are.
Right.
The privacy aspect of those are important, so.
Right.
And they work under different, set of rules. residents, they can keep them outside.
And my last one I'll get out here, and if I'm understanding this, then I wish I had this ahead of time, had a chance to read it, so it's a lot to take in. Are you saying now that you're trying to put emergency shelters under the institution as opposed to under, so that's been separated out from the program itself?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's one of the main points of today, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Well,
Kathy Maxwell, Caldwell Avenue, Kentville. So I just want to clarify here, all those little red slivers that are in amongst the pink and the yellow are R3 within an R1 or R2 area. Is that correct?
many of them, yes.
Many of them,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so in the R3, we could put supportive housing. And our definition says longer-term housing with ongoing supports that may include mental health services and addiction supports. So how much support is going to be in a residence that has mental health and addiction issues? Is it 2 hours a day? Is it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year? How much support is in that? Because to me, that makes a big difference if that home is with mental health and addictions issues.
Thank you for the question. I understand the concern. I have to go back to what planning can do and what we have to do to stay in our lane with that. When it comes to the actual operations of these facilities, that's outside of what we can really regulate. That would come down to different bodies, sometimes provincial, sometimes perhaps independent, but it's outside of what I can do as a planner to really speak to how those organizations run their business, run their service. So
we have no control over the amount of supports that go into those?
Not through the land use bylaw or through the municipal planning strategy. There may be other ways that council could speak to either at a provincial level to determine what council feels is appropriate levels of service, but it's beyond what I can suggest. So.
Good evening, my name is Fred Lower. First of all, you've got a hell of a job. You know? It's a question, right? You've got all this zoning going back and forth. If I want to sell my property, and it's an R2, but I figure to enhance the value, I'm gonna make it an R3. I'm gonna apply for an R3. What do I have to show you, one, for me to get to an R3? And two, do I have to have a development plan? Anyhow.
So individual property owners always have the ability to come in and to apply. In this case would be to upzone your R2 property to R3. An application may be received that has a specific development in mind, or it doesn't. It doesn't have to. So you may be looking to improve the value of your property by doing that, and allow for different development opportunities in the future by developer who may see the value in that. The application itself, there's different policies that apply if you have a particular development in mind, or if you don't. So there's a path either way. So it should be a matter of bringing that forward, and council would consider what you're trying to do there, and would weigh the merits of it based on what we have in policy and the criteria that they have to follow to look at it. So there's certainly a path for it.
Certainly for a developer, that's happening.
Yes.
It's happening in Coastal, I just talked. So
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily anticipating this.
Right, right. You're looking at the potential, the future potential of the land.
I assume that there is.
Between staff and council, we both have that role to review an application such as that, and to determine whether or not appropriate it is. Yeah. Thank you.
Lloyd, we're gonna go to some of the who hasn't spoken. Yeah, whatever we need to do.
My name's Dave Ritzy. I live in downtown Kentville, run a business in downtown Kentville. I think it's clear to many that we're in a fight for our lives and our livelihood in the downtown Kentville area. I just want to talk about the competitive environment that I see ahead. And I think you've got the Donald Hills Connector project in Kentville, you've got the New Minas South project in New Minas. I think we're in a 2-decade fight for growth and development in this area. And my question to you, Darren, and your team, to what extent have you looked at some sort of competitive analysis or comparables in terms of your bylaws, and will they sustain us for the next 2 decades? And are they competitive with New Minas South?
Apologize for the feedback on this thing. To keep it grounded. We can't do that for long enough. So in terms of looking at potential economic growth in particular, or general growth, what are you thinking?
Both.
The plan review that we're working towards will have, both in terms of a residential growth analysis that's being completed, as well as an economic development one. We're hiring new economic development staff shortly, who should be able to help with that process as well, and a new committee for economic development as well. So there's a couple different ways that that's being approached. And from my point of view, we definitely want a good sense of what's happening in the area to make sure that Kentville's positioned well to grow, at least at the same terms that the surrounding region is, and hopefully use advantages that we have here as a town to rise above that even. So there will be opportunities for that, and we'll be doing that through, again, as we work through what this business community is going to help us with, what the new business position, the economic, as well as with our current economic development staff to look at how that goes forward. We know there's some changes in how we're looking at regional business, the regional business environment basically, and we're looking to do more as a town ourselves with that. But certainly with the plan review, there's an opportunity to focus in on that and determine when we need to determine how much space we need to set aside for commercial growth in the town. That's part of that question as well. So what we see on the GFLOM map for commercial is important to, that may change based on, but especially with Donald Hills, if there's opportunities for, because I talked about mixed use, but also just specific commercial growth along Donald Hills. It would be interesting to see how council will want to handle that as we go forward.
Yeah, I know our business is looking very closely at New Minas South. We like the fact that it's commercial and residential, and I think you're introducing institutional into the Donald Hills area, because you were talking about institutional.
Potentially, yeah. We're looking at the right mix for there, so the feedback we get from the public as we work up our plan review will help inform that as well. We'll be talking with the property owners that have large tracts of property in that area as well. And of course, council will have their opportunity to influence and eventually sign off on how they want that to go going forward. So. Okay.
Anyone who hasn't already spoken or asked questions? Okay, Pat?
Good evening, everyone. Pat Norton, I live in Kentville and have for 40-some years. I have lots and lots of questions, and my questions are always around context, definitions, process, and organizational structure. And I probably have 10 or 12 questions in each of those categories, and I know there's not time for that here tonight, and that's not the intent. And, I expect other people must have, many of the same questions that I do. So I'll try and wrap that up in one question that I have, specifically with regard to definitions. I'm just wondering what your definition of public review is.
Public review is something that's mandated by the province that we have to engage in. The current public review process with these types of applications would be something just like this, public participation meeting. We then send it through a couple rounds of review through the planning advisory committee, then back to council, and then council determines whether or not they want to move forward with a given application, in which time there'd be a public hearing, which would be a second opportunity for the public to give them a little more time to think about what's being proposed, to come back and share their thoughts at that point. So that's the basic. And should the public feel that council is not upholding their policies, in certain circumstances, with opportunities for the public to reach out and to appeal a decision that's made by council. So there's a couple different levels of review that go along with that, but that's the basic process that we work under with the Municipal Government Act as a town.
In response to that, just having observed the interactions here tonight, most of them involved 3 or 4, at least, interactions back and forth. And I always have said that communication begins with the response to the response. So I said something, then you said something. We still can't determine that we've actually communicated, because I may have heard or understood nothing of what you said and vice versa. So it's really only from the point of the response to the response on that you actually have any communication. So I'm wondering, you know, just in your explanation of what the public review process is intended to look like, is it intended to involve communication?
If I understand your question correctly, communication in the sense that materials are provided to the public based on the application itself, that we communicate the opportunities for the public to engage, whether or not they want to speak in front of the mic at whichever occasion that may be, whether it's a public participation meeting or a public hearing. And also to make sure that we have open lines of communication in terms of being able to receive correspondence through email as well. So there's not everyone wants to speak in front of the mic. I've gotten used to it a little bit, but I'm not typically a person who enjoys to see myself. But, so there's different opportunities for the public to provide their information and for us to communicate what we're trying to achieve through a proposed. But this is a town initiative. When I'm presenting from the town's point of view for an application, for whether for rezoning or redesignation, it's a different process, because you'd have the applicant up here as well speaking. So, let me see, do you think I answered your question?
Yes, I would say you've answered my question. I don't think you've satisfied my concerns. So, what I saw on the slide is that we have 10 days to send in a written comment, no guarantee of any response coming back. In terms of, if it was me, and I think anybody else here, if we were hoping to make some sort of an intelligent comment and submit it, we would have to, you know, have broad-based information. And I've been to a lot of these meetings in various counties and in this province, and I've been involved in some national groups on some of these things as well. And it just, what seems to be standard practice is this siloed approach. So you can only answer questions about this, and somebody else can only answer questions about that, and everybody has to stay in their lane. But that really is not a context in which people can make any informed opinions or formulate any intelligent questions. So I'm just wondering how we get around that.
else would you want to have in the room tonight?
It's not about who's in the room, it's about what happens in the room. And I would, like, it would be sufficient to have just who's in the room if they had all the information. But if they don't have all the information, and we need all the information, then there would be other people that would need to be in the room for sure. But I don't know who they are, because if you don't know, I sure don't know, you know? And so this does not seem like a process really designed for anything that I would call a meaningful public engagement. Would you agree?
The purpose of tonight's meeting was stated at the beginning. I know you were a little bit late coming in, but we are here to hear from the people. Yes, Darren's here to answer questions, and he can only answer questions based on his role. That's just how it is. We can't answer questions that are appropriate for the province or other bodies. We do have to stay in our role, you know. So if you have questions for Darren about program-based housing or the changes that may be considered by council going forward, we're happy to hear them. But we can only answer the questions we can answer. Let's not shout out from the audience, please, and thanks. That was on the rules at the beginning. I appreciate it. Thank you. Do you have any other questions about program-based housing or this topic for Darren? Okay, thank you. You have how, you know.
You know, we use these terms, but they lack specificity. So in terms of program-based housing, and I know that your area is more about land use, but I used to work for PeopleWorks. So that was a program that was available and a very successful one for people who had various challenges. That's been shut down. Everywhere I look, it seems that programs are being shut down, and we've had various of these types of meetings here over the last year and had some very eloquent speakers telling us about long waits to get mental health services and addiction services, and you know, so we talk about program-based housing, but I'm just wondering, is there any substance to that?
Respectfully, I know there have been meetings in here that have been put on by the provincial government, which have looked at a broader range of topics than what I brought forward tonight, my team was brought forward. So we do recognize that there's a much larger project, or a much larger process, and much greater breadth of knowledge that is required to address some of these issues. We've taken our planning, our land use lens to this, and again, together with council, we've looked at some of these issues on dealing with some of the challenges that the town faces. There may be other avenues. I'm aware there's a new committee that Minister Lord has put together to talk about some of these things. So I mean, there are efforts that are happening. I'm not privy to all of those. But I do interact with those who do have some greater knowledge on those things. So there are conversations that are happening, but we're not representing that broader consortium tonight of ideas that are looking into these issues. So unfortunately, and it's probably not satisfactory, but my lane is land use planning, and that's the lens that we put on this for tonight at least. There may be other top opportunities in the future where a broader group can be brought together, but that wasn't part of my mandate for this evening.
So final question, will you be responding to written comments that you're hoping to receive within 10 days?
Thank you for the questions. When we receive written comments, we'll definitely acknowledge that they've come in. What we typically do, and what we do with all the comments from this evening, we don't assign them to the individuals we try to distill some of the meaning out of the common themes that we've heard and then take those forward to council. So if there are questions that are specific to me or to the department, I will certainly answer them. The 10-day window of time that we've talked about, we should, depending on the questions that we get and whether or not we can answer them appropriately, we'll certainly respond to them in some format. So we'll have to wait and see what the questions are.
Anyone we haven't heard from yet that would like an opportunity to ask a question or make a comment? Okay. Lloyd, we did say at the beginning it's a one-shot deal. So if it's a quick one, I'll let you speak up here, but I don't want to start kind of a dialogue to go popcorn style. What we will do is encourage you, if you have thoughts after the meeting, or if there's something you didn't have an opportunity to say, use that email address that's planning@kentville.ca, or grab one of Darren's cards at the table on the way out, and we'll do our best to accommodate you.
I think we learned something tonight that just slid right by everybody, and I'm really disappointed to hear this. Dave Ritchie just told us we're gonna lose a long-standing business in the downtown.
Not just one.
Okay, guys, we're not doing this.
Okay, so I'm personally disappointed to hear this, because I think that's not a good sign. But really what I put my hand up about is I want to drill down on Fred's question about R3, because I don't think you answered it. Are the council presented with something that they don't know what the plan is? Like, are they supposed to approve something without a plan for R3? Like, it seems pretty vague to me, you know, and I don't think that was answered. Am I correct? Am I right, Fred?
Yes, but.
Yeah.
You know, again, I understand. You gotta stay in your lane. I understand. You can't say, do this one. We need clarity. This isn't clarity. This is, you know, having this on the head, and not giving us clarity as to what the hell's going on. So if I'm applying, this question that is asking, I'm applying to change my designation from R2 to R3. And the only reason I'm doing that is to enhance my value so I can sell it to some kind of developer. Your job is not to help me enhance my real estate value by doing a designation. So the answer to what is the answer to that? How are you going to make sure it's happening all over? This is a new trick. It's happening by developers. Also, unless you put a stop to this, you set precedent, and everybody's going to apply for it. So it works.
Precisely.
Thank you for both questions. I go back to the point that individual property owners have the right to investigate how they may improve their properties. They can rezone, that's one way to do it. They can do different things with development on their properties to improve it. We as staff look at the criteria for rezoning. If it meets those criteria, then we would probably recommend it to council to consider, and then they would look at the same criteria and make their own evaluation. That's the process as it stands. So I don't know if I can be any clearer than that, but it's open to every property owner to.
Do I have to tell you what I want to do for that, to change it to R3? So what I want to put on that piece of property?
No, there's two paths for that. One that has a development attached to it, and one that is more speculative in nature.
It's a speculative,
Yeah, that's.
What's the recommendation?
Well, I mean, it's often good to see what someone intends to do, but it's not required under a critical document.
It's not.
Sorry.
If their intent is not for the good of the town, it's just for me, it's my value, you should tell them to do it, but not have to.
Noted, thank you. Again, we have to follow our criteria when we're reviewing it, otherwise we're not doing our jobs.
Yeah, I understand.
So that's basically where that lands. Thank you.
Last call, anyone we have not heard from that would like to make a comment or ask a question about program-based housing or this particular process that we're undergoing.
Really quick question.
Sure, come on up, Kathy. The question is, the province, we know, has lots of initiatives. We know all about what was going to be happening down there by the marsh a little while ago. What capacity does the town or council have to respond or control or change or amend anything at all with provincial attempts? Because we all know what the province is doing to Kentville with mainstreaming a lot of needs here, and we have service. We've all heard all of that stuff. And then we hear people complaining, well, Kentville's not doing enough, Kentville's not doing enough, and I'm not saying that. My question is, what control do you have over what happens in our town with program-based housing, especially initiatives by the province?
It's a very broad question in many ways, but I'll do my best with it. The province obviously has its own agenda and mandate for carrying out the duties that it's been assigned and that it's been elected based on. They also have powers above what the town has to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. Sometimes they work closely with the town on certain projects. Sometimes it's less of a close arrangement. We're usually aware of things that are happening, but again, I don't have full 360 view of what's happening. I have my own department that I'm mostly focused on. Sometimes there's opportunities to work with the province on things, and they contact me or our department for that respect. So.
Can I answer that question?
Sure.
To clarify?
Sure.
And again, I know so very little about this, so I'm coming at it with a good heart, but I just want to know, an R1 or R2 is for sale. Can the province come in, purchase it, do whatever their plan is with that, and not follow town bylaws because it's the province?
The province does have powers above our bylaws that they can come in and do certain things. I don't know if specifically R1 or R2 properties would be, sorry for this mic, but they do have an ability to override what we have with our bylaws and strategies and policies and things. And so I'll just leave it at that because it depends on I don't know what their intentions are or anything like that, or what their agendas are. I can't really speak to those.
Yeah, I just wondered, again, what type of control you do or don't have, or what is able to be overridden, and then, we have these meetings and people share their ideas and maybe get feedback, maybe don't, but just do policies being followed, but then things are gonna happen anyway, and you never had control of it anyway, because there's people above. Like, it's just sort of, is there a limitation to what the town is able to control in the development in the town?
We do have a certain level, we still have a certain ability. For that matter, the federal government has powers to come in and to do as they need to do in their mandate. So there are different levels above us as well.
I don't want to get out there. This is drawn out by the government, the province, right? What's going on in the province?
The process flow chart.
Right.
Yeah, that is the provincial.
My question is, my thought, is Kentville the only town that's been selected that this is going to be happening to?
That particular process.
Well, because what they want to implement are the support homes and all use the whatever, transition homes when they come from the hospital, where they're gonna go. Is Kentville the only town that you know of at this point that this has been selected, that this is going to happen? Because we are not the only town with a hospital. Middleton has a mental facility down there that I am aware of.
Right. I would say the Kentville situation is not unique in the province. I would also say that we're one of the few local governments that's been willing to step into this issue and try to figure out a way to make it work for the town. Not everyone's doing that. I mentioned a lot of things about definitions tonight and the challenges with definitions. We wish that the province had some standard definitions that we could look to for this, but there's not a lot of consensus on how this should be arranged, and so we're doing our best to try to work our way through it. And that's why you see different iterations of this plan too. There was the one from the fall that we looked at, and now we've modified it a bit, and we're trying to find our way through some of these thorny questions as best we can. So it's not unique to Kentville.
I have read something, but this is actually not, that Kentville was designated, as a place for these, for housing programs, because there are no other facilities between us and Europe. So Kentville was the town designated to handle that? Is that, do you know anything about that?
I'm not aware of that, no. Honestly.
Just on a clarifying point, so.
Wow.
I've been involved in applying for some of these funds, so I know a little bit about how the province allocates the funding, and I think it could be helpful for some of the questions that people are asking. The clear difference is, it's not the province that is deciding that Kentville will become the service hub, or the province has it designated that they will buy certain properties. It is local service organizations who are asking the province and applying for grants to deliver projects in Kentville. Or whatever community, so it's not coming from the province to say this will happen in Kentville. It's local organizations saying, will you fund this for us? And this is the property that we would like to have done. So it's a little bit, it may seem similar, but it's not directive that's coming from the province, it's coming from the local service organizations.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments or questions from folks who have not spoken about program-based housing and this process that we're undergoing right now? Okay, I thank you all very much for your participation and your engagement this evening, and I remind you again that if you have follow-up or you think of something later that you'd like to pass along or ask, then please do that with the email